Hey everybody, welcome to 36 Charge, a podcast about competitive Warhammer 40k, the state of the game, and community news. We're streaming live at twitch.tv/36charge every Monday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, where you can follow and sub. We're also on Spotify and iTunes or wherever else you listen to podcasts. This is episode 47, Code of Conduct and Rules as Written. I am your host, Chris Vo, and joining me today is Benjamin Rubenstein.
Hello.
Oh. And Kevin Lieb.
Howdy, howdy.
And for some
I no
reason,
longer lurk in the shadows.
For some reason, this isn't working. Discord got messed up real. Oh, I figured it out. All right. So our cameras are all working and everything. So, as the title suggests, ITC just released their revised Code of Conduct, I think 90 minutes ago, maybe. And
it was earlier today.
It was earlier today, yeah. There weren't too many changes in it. From when I read over it, it seemed to be mostly codifying. This is what happens if you're a jerk, including you get points removed from your first round up to copying a ban from ITC events. Does any particular part of it you guys want to discuss in detail or point out?
Well, I think before that we're gonna touch on a couple of things, right? Or are we going right into that?
I think we can just go right into that.
Okay. I'm glad that they've now said that there are things that will get you banned, and here they are. Because apparently in the past they were just banning people and not saying anything about it, which is terrible. I love the ITC, but that is a decision that I do not like for a couple of different reasons. I don't like it because I assume they're only doing it in really egregious cases, in which case, but even then, as someone who's doing something particularly egregious, you're getting banned out of nowhere. That wasn't even you may not have been even aware that was an option on the table. Which might be why you were doing the thing. And, sure, you're doing the thing. It's probably good that you got banned. But if people were aware that banning was an option, perhaps behavior would be more reasonable. Threats don't work if no one's aware of them. And getting banned is as great as a punishment, but it's also very useful as a lever to hey, players, don't egregiously cheat, rules of the game matter. We are willing to ban people, and the fact that they were banning people and not telling people that they were banning people kind of just goes to I'm curious what cheating in the ITC would look like if it would be significantly less if people were aware that that was an option. And I don't know, it also means that because they were doing it, but they were only doing it on the down low, when we had multiple larger cheating incidences where more well-known players were caught cheating, did they not get banned because ITC was well, maybe people will notice that we're banning people? I don't know, it just feels weird that they had punishments coming out that were not obvious, and they didn't even have to be oh, this is the guy we banned. All they would have to say is an incident happened, someone was banned. We're not saying who. We're not even saying where the incident was. This is a thing that we do. Be aware. That's literally all they needed to do. It puts very little pressure on them to name names and point fingers. And I think that would have been really good for the game. I mean, they didn't. And this is good because now we know.
Yeah, I agree. It wasn't really codified before, what was worthy, what punishments even were according to the Code of Conduct. The Code of Conduct, I feel it has to be born out of what, I think we have to drag Reese along and kind of not force him to make these things, but the ITC as an organization has always wanted to do be as hands off as possible and let the community decide what to do. And in some instances that works, in some it doesn't. We saw that with the oh god, what was his name? The guy who was cheating in the Northeast 40k circuit.
Sure. What about
GJ Lanigan? GJ.
Yeah, Lanigan. Yeah. So there So I don't think people were even aware of the ITC's like quote unquote ban policy before they said that Lanigan would lose all of his points for the season, and um,
Yeah, that's where
all
they
the
came out and they banned him and took all his points away. And they said, and by the way, we've done this before, but we never told anyone about it before because we didn't think people would notice, and we thought we could get away with just like not telling people. And that's the part where it's like, why wouldn't you tell people?
right. If people aren't aware of it, of the potential punishments, then it might not factor into their decision making. Granted, you shouldn't cheat anyway, because if you are, that speaks to your character. But that being said, it's like kind of like how locks keep honest people honest. If a threat of a ban keeps you from cheating when you otherwise might have, then yeah, it's a good thing to have that codified in the code of conduct.
Yeah, the other thing too is it also gives players an out to like if you're horribly treated against. Like if someone like previously if you go to a GT, your opponent does something egregious, you're like, okay, it's not like ITC is going to do anything about it. Well, it turns out ITC would have done something about it if you told them. But there's like some number of people out there who probably should have been banned by the ITC that just like never got reported because
What
people
was the
were under
point?
the impression that the ITC just like wouldn't do anything.
Right. For better or worse.
Why
I mean, I
why
think it's just worse.
why make an enemy for no gain, right?
Yeah, because like if I call out my opponent, like I don't know, I'm gonna say Kevin is a very honest player. So like I don't know if Kevin like heinously shoots against me, and I'm like not aware that the ITC will just ban him for being a dirty cheater. Like I'm just gonna be like, all right, well that sucked. There's literally nothing I can do about it. I'm just gonna go home and try to avoid going to events that Kevin shows up to, I guess. Whereas like meanwhile, like turns out like I did have outs. I'm sorry, Kevin. You're not.
Hey, may the force be with you included loaded dice.
Including loaded dice.
Episode 1.
Indeed. The man, you made me lose my train of thought. Anyways, yes, that's the whole point, though, right? Is like, it, if you don't know that there's a body enforcing rules, you don't know to report to them. So, like, I don't know. We're complaining about the past. Let's focus on the future. Now that this is a thing, and they're like, hey, like we do just ban people. You should tell us about ban-worthy offenses. This is excellent. This is basically a lot of what we've been asking for over our last couple of podcasts, where we've talked about rules enforcement at larger events.
Yeah. Um, one of the things, so switching the topic a little bit, one of the nice things about this rule document is it's very clearly written for ninth edition. Um, so in case you're new to this, there's two types of cards. There's red cards, which are you're being removed from the event. This is something that is worthy of being disqualified from the event for, and sometimes more.
Yeah,
Uh,
you verbally threatened your opponent with violence or something ridiculous.
yeah. And then there are yellow cards. Now, yellow cards have a variety of 5 to 20 points that if you get this yellow card in this game, you're losing that many points. So you can't just like get a yellow card and be like, oh, well, it had no impact on my game. No, it will. Any yellow card will impact your game. Um, it's gonna hit on those various yellow cards. So some of these are up to the judge's discretion. Um, okay, incorrectly submitting a list and submitting an incorrect list, or failing to meet the submission deadline, minus 20 victory points, and I believe that one applies to your first game.
That's
Thoughts?
Yeah, it does.
crippling. Like you can't win the first. Like even games where I've like completely blown my opponent off the table, I'm not winning by 20 points. Like ninth edition is a game of is an edition of close games. Like it is hard to win by 20 points, and it's hard to throw 20 points out the window and just be like, this is fine. I can win this game.
Unsportsmanlike conduct. This includes that the threatening and the um, essentially anything that you can imagine being unsportsmanlike conduct. Um, one of the things that's very important to note when they were talking about the this document is like if you're trying to weaponize this document against your opponent, that is also unsportsmanlike conduct, and you will also get a yellow card. FYI, guys, which I think is important.
I want to go back to how do we feel about unsportsmanlike conduct and incorrectly submitting lists being like the same penalty? Because incorrectly submitting a list to me doesn't feel like a particularly egregious offense, depending on how it was done. Like if I submit my list and the judge goes over it and you're like, hang on, this list has been like wildly edited. You're 200 points over level. Why are guardsmen 1 point on your in your list? Like, okay, I've done something. But if I like submit my list and I, like many players, just like use Battlescribe or the GWF, and there's like some pistol that costs 5 points that the programmers missed, and I'm just like over points there. Like that's feel like a 20-point infraction. That doesn't feel like something that like the judge should like walk over and be like, you've heinously screwed up. You deserve to like lose all your points. That if it gets caught before the beginning of the game. If I play a game and I'm over points, it is reasonable that like a large chunk of my score gets subtracted. But this appears to be just for submitting a list that's wrong, like before the event even starts.
So Ben, you might hate this answer, but I'm pretty sure at some point in the document they talk about how GW applications are official sources. So if you were to go to a judge and like, hey, yeah, I was off by 5 points, but this is the reason why, I don't even think you'd qualify for the minus 20 points.
Oh, so if Games Workshop, if the Games Workshop app is just like giving me free pistols, I can just take free pistols.
It
I
is an
guess
official
so.
source, to my understanding.
All right, well, I hate that answer, but okay. All right, I'm gonna stick to I pen and papered it, and I missed 5 points in the pistol. Like I don't know. That one sits wrong with me, but I do agree that there are certainly list infractions that are worth 20 points. Like I personally have not seen it, but I could certainly concoct situations in which a player just like submits a list that's wildly over points because they were trying to get away with something.
I mean, there's a
It seems
difference. There's a difference
unlikely
between a clerical
these days,
error or a like battle scribe error and somebody deliberately shaving points.
Yeah, it's like a pretty obvious way. Like, I don't think you're going to see it very much though, because that's like a pretty bad way of cheating. Like, you're just going to get caught. Like, you're just going to get caught. Like, it's not. So, which makes you think that like list error should probably be fewer points, but I mean, it's between 5 and 20, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, these are like, hey, expect subtractions up to this amount, and so incorrectly submitting a list or failing to meet the submission deadline. If you're like trying to submit a list on a napkin and you be like, "This is my list," yeah, do better.
Like, take your 5 points and do it again. Yeah.
No, I actually think that one's like 20 points. I
Oh yeah.
this is
Okay.
you can put this is the 21st century. Battlescribe is a free application. There's like
Email it to the TO. Like, come on.
yeah, there's no reason why like a napkin list should be accepted anymore.
Well, I mean,
Sure.
actually, it even says like handwritten is completely unacceptable. So
Right.
Fair. All right. Fair enough.
All right. Next up, we have dice infractions minus 10 points.
What does that mean? Like, I have loaded dice, or I'm hiding my dice rolls, or is that like all under there?
So outright cheating is a red card. So if you had loaded dice, that you'd be out of the event.
Fair enough.
If you are, they talk about hiding your dice rolls, or they talk about every single die roll you're supposed to declare the intent. And if you're being judged and you do this too many times, like let's just say like um perhaps you go to Gene Sterler Colt back, the one that you have to roll the die, right?
Hmm.
And you're just like you just
Oh,
roll the
gotcha.
die and then say Gene Circle back afterwards, or like you don't really like say what your die rolls are
Yeah.
for
Yeah,
and
you go
try
like,
and
I'm
like
gonna
this
G circle Vect, you roll a die, and then you go, that one's the Vect. This one's to see if I get command points back. I gotcha. Yep, makes
right
sense.
stuff like that. Um, or more likely the vice versa, right? Like this is my Nexus you Gene Circle Vect. Well, it was a one. Well, that was my Nexus command point roll. No, that's a
Rules is written
infraction.
actually. You have to see if you get the command points first, then you do the stratagem.
Yeah,
If it
sure.
matters. That is the only way you're allowed to do it.
All right, maybe Gene Steele Colts was a bad example then.
Well, no, I mean, I'm being pedantic. Most people don't know that. Most people will kind of just do them in like whatever order, because for the most part, it doesn't really matter. But you have to declare it, and then because if you don't declare it, well, then it really does matter. I get that.
Measurement issues. This it's very similar where you have to declare why are you measuring from a place to place, and there kind of has to be like an agreement between both players that the measurement is fair. Obviously, you might be hearing this like, well, this seems like I have to watch my opponent like an eagle and I can't trust anything. No, it's like just don't be shady. Just say like I'm moving 6 inches here, I'm advancing here, blah blah blah. You won't run into measurement issues. This is to prevent the shady stuff.
Basically,
Makes
just
sense.
talk out your moves like you're a normal human being playing a normal game of Warhammer.
Illegally moving and placing models. What is that about?
Um, so that would be like you knocked maybe knocking your models over might not be like the best example. That would be like
This one
that'd be illegal.
confuses. This one just confuses me because like, what's illegally placing a model and what's cheating with just like moving a model when my opponent's not looking? Like, I'm confused. Like, what would be illegally placing a model if it's not just like blatant cheating?
I think that one's just to cover wobbly models.
Is it?
I believe that section had made a mention of wobbly model. Was I wrong?
I
We
could
lost
also
Kevin?
see it being like you're testing where your big model can be to um see what it needs to get a certain charge, and you forget to mark where it was started from, and now you've illegally moved your model. You're you're doing something with a good intent, but you've done it in a way that the game state can't be like accurately measured because you
Reconstructed.
didn't. Yeah,
Okay. Sure.
something like that.
Yeah, that one just like strikes me as weird because like, I don't know, if I just like move a model illegally, isn't that just cheating? Like, isn't that just a red card?
I mean, like,
I don't know.
yeah.
And then at the same time, like if I put a model down like for Deep Strike or something, and then like we get to the end of the charge phase, and then we're like, oh crap, there was like a thing on your building, it can't go there. Like, obviously that's not like, that shouldn't be like minus 10 points to me if I like did to see my opponent's model under a building, he didn't point it out to me when I put my model down. Like, could that be weaponized in the document? So like, I'm just a little confused as to like what illegally placing a model would fall under. I don't know. I'm sure it'll. That one's not particular. I'm being pedantic. We can move on.
I mean,
Yeah,
there's a section in there for pedantism where it's saying if you're trying to weaponize the code of conduct, like fuck you,
Yeah.
you get a yellow card.
Yeah.
Oh, this isn't
So
me trying to weaponize it. This is me complaining about it. It's much better. I'm just saying that bullet point doesn't do anything. Anyway, next
misplaying
one
a
up.
rule, um, that might be like this one would be like this is why you need a judge to like kind of judge it. Like, did he just like actually misplay the rule and misunderstand it, or was it uh actually with ill intent in mind?
Right. So my question there though, ill intent again would just be like cheating, right? So you have to red card them. So
Yeah.
this would probably be like misplaying a rule in a way that generated an advantage, even if it's by accident. Just like you get knocked 10 points.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's harsh, but
Oh,
probably
so
reasonable.
I didn't cover this earlier, but they decrease the amount of yellow cards you can get in an event. If you get 2 yellow cards, it becomes a red card.
Like
So
that's always been the
any
way.
two,
So like if I forget 2 different rules in my army, I'm just or if I mess up 2 different rules in my army, I'm out.
yeah, and get called on it.
Yikes. All right. That is interesting. That I feel like misplaying a rule needs to get a bit more specific because I've played a lot of extremely tight games against extremely good players, and we've definitely like quote unquote misplayed rules.
So
But man,
yeah,
that one just seems like very like if you can only do this twice, that one misplaying a rule catches a lot of things under that net.
yeah.
Like, oh,
That
we forgot. Like, I forgot -1 to hit for shooting through cover. Is that -10 victory points? It shouldn't be, right? But like, as according to this document, it might be,
I mean, rules as written, it is.
right? But like, it doesn't feel like it should be. That feels like it should be something where we have to roll it back, or I like lose the shooting or something. Not just like, oh, -10 victory points. Would you like to just like pick up your models now? You can't win.
Um, I read through the rules document. I can't actually remember. Do they talk about how it's both players' responsibility to keep the game state?
Uh,
Yes.
I believe so, but I could be mixing this up with Magic.
So keep in mind, everybody, and this once again goes to the weaponizing the document argument. Let's say, for instance, you shoot a gun, you throw a frag grenade or a crack grenade, whichever one's the blast one.
Sure,
Uh, what?
sure.
And
That's frag.
at a 20-man Homer Gaunt unit, and you just roll the d6 and you get the 3 and and you later come back and realize, oh wait a minute, we should just max it out. That's kind of both players' responsibility.
Yeah.
Um,
Also, in no world should you lose 10 points for that because, like, you learn that's literally good for your opponent,
right. Well, it's
which
actually
is
kind of
reasonable.
yeah. It is kind of on both players' like responsibility to make sure like the game state is upheld.
Yeah.
Um,
So this next one is misrepresenting a rule to your opponent. It's -20. So this is one of the big ones. Um, I really like that, to be honest. This one, like, if you are quoting your book, like, get it right. And if you're not sure, definitely look at it.
so
Um,
an example of this for anyone who's wondering would be Sisters of Battle had a unique chapter trait where they can choose which penalties and bonuses apply to their bolter weapons. So you might say, oh, my heavy bolters don't get penalized for moving, which is like true, but that's not really the full rule, right? Then your opponent might choose to go into dense cover thinking that'll protect them in some way and being like, surprise, that rule is actually I can ignore all -1s. That
that's
would be
fair.
misrepresenting the rule.
That's fair.
Um, in case someone's looking for an example, like because
Or it's not just like you lying about what your book says.
right,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's
I didn't think
also
of that.
the example in there where it says like, you know, if your opponent asks you if you can advance and charge, and you say no, knowing full well that yes, technically your units can advance and charge, but you have a stratagem that allows them to, and you don't say that to them. That would be misrepresenting your rules.
right. That'd even be a better example. Um, uh,
All right, let's
I
do the next
remember
one. Oh,
listening.
never mind.
I
Sorry,
remember
go ahead.
listening to this guy talk about how in seventh edition there was a way of getting your AdMech models have like strength 8, and someone asked like, "Hey, what's the strength of that model?" And it's like, "Oh, so how strong is that model in combat?" And it's like, "Oh, it's strength 4." And it's like he put his knight into it, and all of a sudden it was strength 8, so it could actually wound him.
Surprise! Everyone's got a power fist.
I think it was some weird combination of auras and other abilities going on, but
And that was messed up in 7th edition is the moral of this story.
yeah. All right,
Um,
slow
Next
player
up,
dice, slow player dice related infractions -20 points.
clock related,
What
right?
did I say?
You said dice.
Oh, sorry, I sorry.
It's all good. This one is something that I see over and over and over, which is like TOs go, "Hey guys, don't pause the clocks," and then everyone pauses the clocks. Like everyone just pauses the clocks. Like the TO could like holler into your face, "Don't pause the clocks." People pause the clocks. I've done
As
it.
you're hitting the pause button,
Like
and
I've run events with clocks. I go, okay, everyone, do not pause the clocks. Get to we got like 10 minutes left in the round. How do you guys have 15 minutes left in your 2 clocks? Oh, we've been pausing them, just count up the score. And then we had like a 20-minute discussion as to the points while they were paused. Like, awesome. Like, I'm taking 5 minutes off of both your clocks. I don't know what to do. Like, we're just like overtime, totally not to pause the clocks. So yeah, don't pause the clocks. We're gonna see this a lot. Like, I actually think this is one that like is legitimately just gonna come up. Or like people are just gonna be like, oh, they paused the clocks and just like get whacked.
yeah,
Which actually might not even affect the outcome of the game. Because it's like, who's been pausing the clocks? And just be like, wow, we've been pausing the score. Well, 20 points off of both of you. It doesn't affect this game, but now you're both going to really struggle to win the tournament.
Hmm. Yeah,
And that's
I
sort of
like
like
that in theory.
sorry, go ahead. Yeah, and that one's sort of like, that example is like victimless. Like, no one's like angle shooting there. They're pausing the clocks to count points. But there are certainly angle shooting things you can do with clocks. You know, letting your opponent play on or like letting yourself play on your opponent's time if your opponent's not noticing. And like I've done this. I've like played like 10 minutes on my opponent's time, and they're just like, oh, yeah, on your next turn, like take 10 minutes of my time. Like you can just fix it. Like it doesn't have to be like schemy, but it certainly can be if you because like clocks are hard. Sometimes you just forget. Like sometimes you're just playing the game, you forget about the clock.
Yeah. So I have a question for you, Ben or Chris. You're TOing an event, okay?
Yeah.
Someone's paused the clock. How many and let's say they're a full 30 minutes off of where they're supposed to be. Okay. How many victory
30.
points do you subtract? Now keep in mind both sides are guilty, so they're probably both going to get the same victory point penalty. But the victory points do matter because a lot of tiebreakers at the end of events are determined by victory points.
20. The document says 20. 20 feels reasonable to me.
Okay. What if it's 5 minutes off? Does it change anything? Is it
Did I loudly say don't pause the clocks at the beginning of the round?
absolutely
20.
Probably, yeah.
okay? Um, Last up we have angle shooting, and they say no less than 10 points, which is interesting because it's the only one that they explicitly say don't. You have to go at least 10.
Yeah, there's no
Uh,
ceiling on this one, which is interesting.
well, there's overall ceiling on everything, so that one, I guess you could go up to 20. It's weird that they put that one at different. So they describe angle shooting as an act of using various underhanded, unfair methods to take advantage of inexperienced opponents. What an angle shooter does may be marginally or technically legal, but it is neither ethical nor sportsmanlike.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
chat's asking
I
what
think
angle
this is where
shooting
I
is.
got that advance and charge example from.
Yeah, so yeah, angle shooting chat would be basically attempting to win the game
With gotchas.
using legal things that are outside of like actually playing the game. For example, weaponizing the document.
Yeah,
Trying to
like
get your
if you
opponent in
were
trouble
playing
things.
if you were playing like against custodies and you're like, hey, and you explicitly ask them, hey, are there any tricks that you can do in the charge phase, and they don't tell you about like stooping dive, like that would be angle shooting.
Well, that'd be
Um,
misrepresenting your rule, but I
that
mean,
would be misrepresenting your rules. So,
angle shooting would be like my opponent throws a grenade with blast against my 20-man squad. They just roll the d6, they never attacks, and then I call a judge and try and get them minus 10 points for screwing up a rule. Like that's not the intention of that rule. Like it's just I'm trying to get an unfair advantage through without like quote unquote explicitly cheating. It's sort of a catch-all term.
Yeah.
another I found a good example. So let's say you're talking about secondaries. You have a person who's like new to secondaries. Okay, it seems pretty core, but we're talking about inexperienced players here, so this might be an RTT. Most secondaries say you score them at the end of the game, right?
Yep.
So an angle shooting would be like saying like, well, I've only scored these points. You just say your primary points, right? Anything that you've actually scored up until now. Well, they're telling you effectively what they're going to be scoring at the end of the game if nothing changes, right?
Yeah.
That'd be angle shooting because you're technically not wrong. You have not scored those points yet because you scored them at the end of the game. But anyone in their right mind would just say what their full points are, or what their I'm on track to score this many points, right? That's like
Fair.
it's
Yeah.
misleading the opponent. It's getting an advantage where you're technically right, but you're taking advantage of like people being
Yeah.
not familiar with the game. You're making the hobby unapproachable.
Yeah. To me, angle shooting has, because coming from like a magic background, angle shooting to me has always meant like weaponizing the rules, which is in other places here, where it's like you can't weaponize the penalty document against your opponent. It's like it's not here to punish new players who like are hurting themselves by forgetting rules. It's here to get people who are like actively gaining advantage through the rules.
Chat's
Sort
asking,
of a
is
catch-all
angle
term.
shooting like porn? You know it when you see it. I would say so. I would say that's a. I mean, like if it's good enough for a federal judge, then it's good enough for Warhammer.
Yeah, exactly. Chat Vendilion click myself. That's a magic thing to trick your opponent into showing you their hand when they really don't have to. Because it's yeah, exactly.
Yep. So I want to hit up some. Now that we've covered yellow cards, I kind of want to hit up some other interesting things in the document. So
Yeah.
chess
Talk about-
blocks.
Wait, can we talk about red cards?
Sure.
Okay. So red cards, they've got they've got a couple different bullet points in this one. We got game disqualification. So a judge can disqualify a player from their current game. The player receives 0 points for this game, which is a loss. The opponent of the disqualified player receives a bye score unless the opponent's score would be higher. This is interesting that this is an option. That because I was under the impression a red card booted you from the event, but no, red card just boots you from the game. Did I misread that?
It could be you get a red card. My understanding of it is you get a red card in like the final round, but your entire tournament doesn't go away. Just that round does, and you're not,
Gotcha.
or
Okay.
you're in the semifinals.
Because I could.
Uh,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's like you're out of the event, but we don't want you to not get points because I don't know.
I could see situations, especially with new players, where like I don't know, an AdMech player shows up to the event and plays the first round against another new player with the wrong edition codex. Like,
Oh no.
you don't want to be like that one might be like unfixable because of army construction. I don't know. Let's say they wildly misplay their chapter tactic. Like they think it's the they think they don't realize that Space Marines can't just like stay in the same doctrine the entire time anymore. I don't know. And somehow this doesn't get caught until the end of the game. Well, they're super new, right? You don't want to just be like, you're out. You can't play anymore. But you also definitely don't want to look at their opponent and be like, you've lost. Sucks to be you. So this is like a reasonable thing to exist, but I wouldn't expect it to happen at high tables. This is something I would expect to see at like RTTs with new players, like someone just wildly misplays something and you're like, wasn't malicious, but I have to make you lose this game in a way that
Well,
like maintains the tournament integrity.
keep in mind, I believe 2 yellow cards becomes a red card, so this might be where 2 yellow cards become. Like it's a you've
That's fair.
committed 2 small infractions. We don't want to penalize you for the entire season, but you're not good to continue playing in the event.
Well, this is just for the game, right? Just
Right.
this is one game.
Go ahead.
All right, because the next one is event disqualification. So a judge can disqualify a player from their event. The player is immediately removed from the roster of active players. They are removed from the event venue. Their current game is scored as 0. Their current opponent is scored as a tabling. And unless the opponent current score would be higher, no ITC points are awarded for any games played during the event for the penalized player. Player has to leave. They can't like hang out. They gotta like leave the premises. So this is sort of a this is sort of not quite the big one, but this one's more significant. And then the last one is banned for 3, 6, 8, or 12 months for especially egregious or repeated fouls or behaviors. A judge can request a ban for a player from the ITC for the specified time. While a player is banned, they cannot attend FLG sponsored events such as the Bay Area Open, the Las Vegas Open, or the SoCal Open. While a player is banned, they will not accrue ITC points during this time period. Note, other ITC events may choose to adhere to this ban at their own discretion. So yeah, it's neat that they have 3 levels of that. I can't think of a lot of situations where someone's getting booted from an event that that like ITC shouldn't be like talked to. Unless with the exception of like this scenario I concocted for like the game disqualification, like somehow not being caught for multiple rounds, you get to the end and you're like, wow, like they didn't play a single rule at the whole event, but like, you know, they picked up their codex yesterday, so you're banned from the event. We're not going to talk to anyone about it. What do you guys think?
So I'm glad the lesser one hears. I'm taking a quick look through the documentation. A lot of times it does say go like straight up to, and you're also out of the event when red cards happen, with the caveat being the 2 yellow card situation. Oh no, even the 2 yellow card situation says you're out of the event.
Yeah, it's weird.
This is a let judges have discretion, because we need to be able to say, hey, there is a lesser one when the judge feels it's correct. And keep in mind that, like, this is a good thing to make more people willing to use ITC rules. If I don't want to say I'm going to play it by ITC and then not have the ability to not say, as a TO, I could see enjoying that this is in the document, or feeling like it's necessary to be in the document.
Yeah, I have the power to point at this and be like, I do have this ability to just like boot people. Get out.
Because imagine
Um,
the situation where someone, they legitimately mess up, they do something they're not supposed to, they're going to get a red card, but they've messed up in a way that's like, yeah, you need to get the red card, but you're not like a jerk. But all of a sudden, you have the person who he was getting the red card against, uh, has a bunch of friends who like kind of want to like gang up on the person who was getting the red card. As a TO, I'd be happy that I can say like, no, guys, like I said, we were playing ITC. In ITC, it says like I can go down to this thing, and I feel that is
like,
correct.
yeah, we're doing a game disqualification. Like, they're not getting booted from the event.
And you can't
Yeah,
bully me into it, because that is, yeah.
yeah. I like my scenario of like someone who's never played Space Marines before. They mess up going down doctrines. Like, they're a new player. It was round one at an RTT. Whatever. Like, they weren't going to win the event. They brought like a bunch of
Oh,
tactical
here's
Marines with
one.
rocket launchers.
I thought assault guns were in the assault doctrine.
Sure, that's super fair.
I've never had that well, I actually haven't had that confusion, but it it has like, I have like had to slow down and be like, assault guns, not assault doctrine. Blah 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 blah. Anyway,
Yeah,
everything
that
good,
is
Chris?
What?
You back?
Oh yes, I'm back. Yeah, there was a cop at my door. Apparently, there's kids in my neighborhood shooting BB guns at houses, and he wants to know if my doorbell caught anything.
Oh,
them
nice.
darn kids. All right. Kevin, you had another thing you wanted to hit, and I apologize. I dragged you away from it to talk about red cards.
Gotcha. Chess clocks. So, they have an entire section talking about chess clocks. I don't think we need to get into it, but the important part is that players need not agree to use the clock. If either player wishes to use one, it must be used.
Period.
Period.
Yay.
Yay. Now you don't have to look at your guard opponent, who's clearly your 300 infantrymen guard opponent, who's clearly going to like take up twice as much time as you, and being like, uh, I want to be on chess clock. Well, I don't want to be. Let me just take up all my time. Whoop, 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 whoop.
This isn't from a personal experience.
That was
Um,
a that was a hell of a GT. RTT. Supposed to be a GT. Um, Next up, verbal agreements. Oh, actually, Chris, do you have anything to say about the chess clock thing?
No, I mean, I think it's been, if not explicitly stated, then just part of the culture where if one person wants a clock, you're using a clock. So again, one of those things where it's nice to have codified.
yeah. Around here, if you go to an ITC event, the TOs are generally speaking enforcing chess clocks if anyone wants to use a chess clock. I haven't seen a local event that's like within driving distance of myself, where if someone brings a chess clock, the other person doesn't want to use it, the TO will say, no, you can't. For ITC, for casual events, I have seen TOs say no chess clocks, no matter what, which is like, it's fine. It's a casual event. We're here to have fun. You don't want
Yeah,
to
I
pressure
agree.
new players.
I agree. Okay, next up, verbal agreements. It talks about how verbal agreements between players that alter the rules and interpretation of the rules, or the uh, abdication of disputes, are binding and enforceable during the course of the game, and you need a third party to like be there to witness such agreements. Um, an example being the play by intent agreement.
The third party thing is like wild. Like, has a like, I wouldn't even be surprised if at GTs, if we just get into the habit of like the TA just going, right now, decide if you want to play by intent or not. Every table playing by intent, raise your hand. I'm gonna like drop a token on your table so that like it's witnessed. because that's like a conversation I have like in 80% of games. We're just like, we're going to play by intent. Like if you put a thing near an objective and you're like, it's on the objective, I can say, no, it's not now. And I can't at the end of my next turn be like, wait, it's 3.5 inches away.
Right. I think it's to prevent people from having it both ways when it comes to playing by intent.
Well, keep in mind it's not just talking about playing by intent, but
no, but that's just the most readily
that's the
available
big one that jumps out to me.
yeah.
Like,
and a third party can be another player. They talk about how a third party could be another player. So it might be the table next door. It's like, hey guys, we're playing by intent. And
yeah, that's just something that people are going to get used to. But
yeah,
because that one, that's the one I think that's the social contract. It's going to feel weird when you like you and your opponent like we're both going to be respectful and play by intent. But just in case you turn out to be a jerk, let me tag my friend on the shoulder to make sure he's seen us have this conversation, which feels weird. Which goes back to like perhaps the TOs will just be like everyone raise your hand because that like seems easier to me. But I don't know.
It'll be like when you go to a Brazilian steakhouse and you just flip the card over if you're playing by intent or want meat, or you flip it over if you're not.
I don't know that reference, but okay. Sure.
You've never been to a Brazilian steakhouse, so it's like a all you can eat like buffet thing. There's like a green and red card on your table. If you want them to come out with more meat on for your plate, then you put the green card up, and if you decide, no more, then you flip it over. Then you show the red side, and they stop bothering you with like their big skewers of meat.
I've never done this in my life, but it sounds fascinating. Neat. Well, go to a Brazilian steakhouse sometime. You can show me how it works.
oh, next up,
Yes,
kind of under the same line of chess clocks. Dice apps used at events that are not official Games Workshop products must be approved by the event organizer before being used. The important part about this means Games Workshop official dice apps don't need to be approved. They are just legal, which I'm a big fan of.
Yeah, it's gives GW like a lot more leeway to just like print works. Like everything hits on sixes and explodes on sixes and like rolls 5 million dice to get the same averages as guardsmen without just being like, and also finish your game in 3 hours somehow on a chess clock. Like now you can actually just do that because the dice app.
There's verbiage talking about modeling for advantage. If it's discovered that you're modeling for advantage, you gain advantage throughout the game already. It's minus 20 points. If this has been through a course of many games, this might be upgraded to a red card.
Is there any verbiage on like getting models pulled for being like inappropriate? Counts as getting models counts as pre-approved.
So my understanding here would be if it does say that there are some, like, you can do some customizations to your models, like maybe you put a different head on or stuff like
Yeah,
that.
that's not going to change the profile though.
Right. Sorry, I don't actually explicitly remember
I
that
mean, like
wording.
in practice, things like gets bash or counts as at least when it comes to modeling for advantage, it's always like it when you see it. Because that's just something that's like super hard to like definitively like define.
Gotcha. They might be leaving that as a tournament to tournament basis, which is reasonable because many TOs have very specific feelings about counts as models, and also depending on like if you're running a GW event or in a GW store or what your store is like comfortable with in terms of third party stuff. Like it's probably I've asked this question and now I'm realizing that it's probably for the best that it's not in this document.
Yeah.
And
So they actually do have wording on it.
No.
In the spirit of the hobby, players can alter their models to be different than the standard to make them look better, more unique, fit their army theme, etc. In these circumstances, players should have the standard model available as a standard during the game when necessary for things like measurements, line of sight checking, and check for cover and concealment, etc.
Huh.
Or have some other reasonable accommodation. Like I remember seeing this great Imperial Guard army where every single infantryman was uh, modeled to be popping out of like a trapdoor, like they were all Viet Cong. But he just put grass on all of them that was tall, about the same height as like a regular guardsman. So that, you know, he always played it as, if you can see the grass, you can see the guy. But yeah, if you're running
That's not what this says though. This says that you'd have to. I guess in that case though, you wouldn't need a million. You wouldn't need to have like a second army. You need a guardsman that you could like. Can I see that guy? And you could replace the guardsman with like that one guy.
yeah,
God,
you could
yes,
do
I can see
that.
guy.
Something
Well,
similar
that
to
guy's supposed to have a grenade launcher, and the model you're using doesn't have
No,
a grenade launcher.
I don't.
yeah,
Weaponizing the document.
Yeah, I think
along those
only
lines, if
document-
you're a TO, like have your counts as policy or proxy policy, like just be upfront as soon as you figure it out. Because right now, I'm trying to figure out if my Contender Dreadnought with multi meltas will, if I can run it as having Volkites, because Volkites are out of stock on Forge World and have been for like months now.
Fair enough. Yeah. Dreadport in chat is saying he's going to bring an extra model for every orc unit in his list. If you have not seen that orc army, it's beautiful. Every model is a grot. The Mega Knobs are grots piloting Ambots. The Weird Boys are grots riding actual Weird Boys. It's great. Everything's great.
That's the grot army taken to an extreme.
It is. It's awesome. You'll get a chance to play against him at some point, I'm sure, because he's a local.
Oh, just going back real quick to a previous topic real fast. So I know you two are interested in going to the Battle for Salvation, I think, over in New York. Is that still correct?
Well, it is unfortunately sold out, and I didn't get a ticket. So.
Oh, well, I was gonna say there's a Brazilian steakhouse 15 minutes away from where Battle for Salvation is gonna be. So.
Oh well, unfortunate. I've missed my chance. Maybe next year.
Well, I know at ArmorCon there's gonna be one about 30 minutes away, because I know there's one in Boston because I've been there.
All right, I'll go to one with you after ArmorCon. Yeah, that sounds good. Anything else?
That's all I had for the document. Those are my things I found interesting or happy to see in there.
Yeah, generally speaking, I like it. I think my least favorite thing is actually having an explicit proxy model, or not proxy model, like counts as model policy in the document, because I feel like a lot of TOs have a different take on how they like, in either like both in terms of more extreme or less extreme of like what they will or won't accept as a counts as model and what they expect you to do to accommodate people with your counts as models. I do wish there was a little bit more of an ability as a TO to be like, we're using this document, period. Now I think we're using this document with this 2 exceptions on their counts as rules, because I don't really expect the Grot army to bring a non-Grot version of every unit, when the Grot versions are extraordinarily similar in profile, but just have Grots instead of normal orc heads. But minus that, I think this is really good.
I get it. I think it's better than some, because I think it's important, because sometimes you might feel like your model's like the right size, but like actually having the stand-in is like pretty important. I, I get it, it's annoying because that might mean you have to order like double of a certain model, especially if it's like a random character. Like, let's say you like turn Gil. Let's say for some reason you like really like salamanders, but you want to play them with Ultramarines rules, and you turn Gilliman into a Vulcan, and not Vulcan, oh god,
Yeah, Vulcan.
Vulcan, yeah.
Yeah, you're right the first time.
My brain went to the Star Trek thing, which is
That's
similar.
fair.
I was like, no, that has to be wrong. Anyway, and you like turn it into, I believe his weapon's a hammer, and all of a sudden it's like, now you have to have an entire second Gilliman. It's like,
Yep.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. My thought goes to, I have a sick Terminator in sorcerer and Terminator armor like proxy that like really I haven't made him any wider or taller. He just has a different backpack and his offhand is like a bunch of mutant arms. And it feels weird that like I would need an extra because the tallest point in the model is still the force staff that he's holding in the air, which is the same thing as like a normal Terminator on a.
Is he still in
sorcerer.
Terminator armor?
Yeah. Yeah, it's the normal sorcerer and Terminator armor model, but with a couple with the limbs are a little bit different. I don't. It's fine. It's like there are certainly worse takes they could have had. We're being pedantic a little bit. I think this is good. I think that my favorite part about this is that they've said out loud, "Hey, we ban people. TOs can petition to get people banned for the nonsense."
The question, Ben, do you think you're making a rules as written or a rules as intended argument?
It's unclear at this point.
But that's our part 2 conversation. Rules as written.
Indeed. The one thing that is missing from this document that I think is really missing from this document is a way for tournaments to share data. Like, it's great that people at TOs can share back to ITC, like, hey, we got like this person like who's throwing beer bottles at his opponent. We should probably ban him. Like, that's great. He should be banned. The part that I want to see, which is like the next step, is I want to see like, hey, this guy round 1 like tried to stay in the Devastator Doctrine the entire game, and you know what? If he never does it again, whatever. If ITC hears about the same guy saying the Devastator Doctrine for the first round 11 times, he should probably also be banned because he's doing it on purpose.
So Ben, the only thing I will say to you is that might be in like a TO document that's not in the general code of conduct document.
And
so we
that's,
don't know if that doesn't
fair.
exist.
That's fair. Like they could
wouldn't-
certainly do it at GTs, but I'm talking like I want like magic level like RTTs, like every event is doing it, and I just don't think we're going to see that. But that's all right.
But I don't think that's
this is a big step.
Yeah, I don't know if that would actually be in this document.
That's fair. That might be coming later.
Yeah.
All right. Part 2.
Part 2. Rules as
All
written
right.
versus
Oh, sorry, go ahead. You can do it. I've been talking a lot.
rules as written versus rules as intended. So
Featuring Gaunt's Ghosts.
featuring Gaunt's Ghost. So for those of you who don't know, there is a rules as written infinite combo where a certain model in the Gaunt's Ghost can kill every enemy model within 6 inches. The way this works is it says anytime I make a shooting attack and I don't hit with my autocannon, I can shoot again. But this model also has crack grenades.
Frag
grenades. Just frag grenades?
Doesn't matter. He has another weapon.
Has another weapon. And I will just keep throwing my infinite supply of frag grenades until every ball within 6 inches is dead. And then I'll shoot my autocannon.
Yeah, that Warlord Titan, fucking gone.
Woo. Gaunt's Ghost.
This is clearly not as intended. So in terms of like this particular case, no sane TO is going to let you play it this way. And
if they do, no sane player is going to not call for a chess clock and then tell you to slow roll every single one.
I mean, I honestly, I think if I get to the point where with the TO rules that my opponent's allowed to pick up everything within 6 inches of his model, I'm just gonna be like, if this is how you want to win the game, congratulations, and then pick up my models because I don't want to play that game. Like, and anyways, the point is like this isn't really a rule that we plan on like expect to like see unchanged because it's full send nonsense. But there are certainly less egregious examples. Where we get into like rules as written versus rules as intended.
I've got a good example for written versus intended. So
yeah.
A Lehman Russ battle tank. If you look at the war gear options, it says things like you can replace it with the battle cannon with, the Nova cannon, or you can replace the heavy bolter with a laser cannon. It also says any model may take items from the vehicle equipment list. On that list it's just a list of weapons: storm bolters, track guards, hunter killer missiles. Those are the thing is like the storm bolter or the stubber. It says you may take items from it. It doesn't say you can take one. I mean, you could take like infinite like track guards too. We won't do you anything. You can take 30 storm bolters onto a single tank because it doesn't say you can't. Now, clearly, that's how it is as written. Clearly, as intended, pick fucking one of them. You know.
Yeah. The other one I'll go to is the murder succubus with the whips, not the whips, the chain flails, where every time she fails to attack, she makes another attack, and for a while, people are like, "Ah, but the next attack is 2 more hit rolls." And like that clearly wasn't supposed to like make it so that you were incentivized to miss your attacks and then make more attacks later. Um, like these are both things that are like just on just the opposite sides of like what players were willing to say that the rule was supposed to be. And I think it's like one of the hardest things for TOs to be like, especially pre FAQs, where it's just like what is supposed to be happening.
Um, Another more modern example, I believe it's Art and Shroud, the ones that can move and advance as though they stood still,
Yeah.
right? But the actual wording is, um, models in this unit can move and advance, and until the end of the shooting phase, they're treated as standing still. But
If a model does a normal move or advances, they are treated as having when you get to the shooting phase, until the end of the shooting phase, you
no,
can
no, no, no. It doesn't say until you get. It says until the end of the shooting phase,
yeah.
the upcoming shooting phase.
Yeah.
And the important thing here is, can I advance out onto an objective and do an action there? Because it says you're standing still, and models that sit still can do actions. They're
The
not.
new
They had not.
new FAQ says you can't, so that one actually is a written rule somewhere. But at one point it wasn't, and that's fair. Yeah. Can a salamander unit fall back and shoot for a while? That was like unclear. Um so I guess what is our take here? Like is it just like give up, throw our hands up, who knows?
I think the take is to boycott all Games Workshop products until they hire competent rules writers that write tight rule sets that can't be broken.
So my take, as someone who's played Tau in ninth edition, and some of the Tau ninth edition rules are, I don't complain of them not being good. Some other things are also a rules nightmare. I email the TO and I say, "Hey, this is a nightmare. How are you going to rule it?" And then at the beginning of every game with my opponent, I go, "Heads up, I've talked to the TO. This is how they're ruling it." Um, and I think that's an important habit to get into if you're playing an army that has weird nonsense going on.
Uh,
I'd agree with that,
this
especially
kind
if you
of.
know that, like one interpretation of the rules. And I think it's important to state that like things that are worded strangely, rules as written, oftentimes have like several different, distinctly different interpretations that are all correct in their own way.
Yeah, because it's like the literal thing that they wrote, which is that my Raven Guard bike can vibrate in place, shoot, kill your unit, and the counting has moved 12 inches. Or there's what they clearly meant, which was like, you gotta go somewhere. And that they have since FAQ'd that to be like, all right, guys, like, come on. We meant you had to go somewhere. Um, but I think GW is finding more and more often that they have to do this. They have to actually write, like, all right, we didn't realize like the level of nonsense you guys were gonna read into this. Like, you gotta go somewhere to do the thing.
Right. And going back to that Raven Guard example, so they talk about how it's like the true distance. It's like as the Raven flies. Haha.
I
um,
No.
and this leads to an interesting thing where, let's say you're not even like vibrating, you're just like actually going around a corner. It's like 7 inches this way, 7 inches this way. Quick Pythagorean theorem math.
That works.
Is that over 12 inches?
Sort of. No. Oh, if you're like going around a circle? No.
No, no.
That-
So let's say you're at a corner. This is 7 inches. This is 7 inches. I believe this would be almost exactly 10 inches, so you wouldn't be
Yeah.
meeting that 12-inch requirement.
Even
I
me with
guess
14.
but it's 14. And there's a force here, so you lose 2 inches going through it.
There you go.
Okay.
There are situations. What Kevin's trying to say is there are situations where you have to drive around buildings in like squiggly lines where you move the model the full distance and somehow you're not a foot away from where you started, and now it's like am I like within the spirit of the rule? Your model moved and it moved pretty far, but within the rules written now, it doesn't do it. And like, what do you like? How do you do that? And that's a conversation that you should have with if you are going into a tournament with a Raven Guard army. You basically have one of two options. You have always take the bad version, or talk to the TO beforehand, and then make sure your opponent knows what's going on. Because like the worst thing you can do is talk to the TO and then gotcha your opponent with the TO's ruling.
Well, I would say now that GW has had an official ruling, you have to play with what the official ruling is.
Fair.
But think about the situation before that official ruling. I'm the TO. What kind of rules do I say? Do I say like, is it the old, once again, the porn argument where you know what moving 14 inches is? We don't have to describe it.
You know it when you see it. That model moved 12 inches or it didn't. Like you picking up the model and spinning it like a top and then putting it down. That's not 12 inches.
Hey, what's an inch between friends?
Oh no. um yeah, so anyways,
But what
I
kind
said
of
this
ruling would you have done beforehand? And the secret is that if you feel like an awkward ruling that might come up, you should talk with the TO beforehand and be like, "Hey, I'm fine with either. What's your decision?" Um, uh,
Yeah,
and
you don't want to show up and just be like, I'm playing it this way until like the TO walks over and goes like, we both know that's nonsense. Like, because that might be their opinion. Their opinion could reasonably be your model vibrating in place isn't moving 12 inches, or is not what GW wanted that secondary to be doing, or your succubus shouldn't be doubling its attacks every time it misses, or whatever. Um, your Argent Shroud models shouldn't be able to move and then do actions, advanced to do actions rather. Um, and you don't want to get whacked sideways with that FAQ or with that FAQ, with that ruling, just sort of like an on-spot FAQ.
right. And this kind of goes back to it's not the angle shooting that they talked about, but it's kind of angle shooting. You're trying to get it. You are being technically right, but are you?
Yeah.
Um, So this actually brings up an interesting one where both Ben and we've talked about this a few times, and we actually thought the spirit of the rule was something different than what GW ruled.
Yeah. Oh.
Explain.
All right. Let's get into this one.
So it's in the rare rules section. Rules that count as having remain stationary. Some models allow a unit to count as remaining stationary or count as having not moved, even if the unit has moved during the previous movement phase. And then bullet point 6. Even if a reinforcement unit is subject to such a rule, the remain stationary rule, that rule has no effect on the unit in the turn they are set up on the battlefield. This means reinforcement units always count as having moved, i.e., never counted having remained stationary. Remember, this includes reposition and replacement units. So
Yeah, that's
reposition.
like real wild.
Um, so an example where this would come up is Ultramarine Devastators in the Tactile Doctrine coming out of a drop pod.
Yeah, they're -1 to hit.
And I, in the spirit of what I thought the Ultramarines rule was, wouldn't have said that.
Yeah, 100%. I would never have questioned my opponent if my opponent's playing Ultramarines. Let's be honest. I would never have questioned Kevin taking Devastators out of a drop pod and being like, they're hitting on threes. Like, yeah, they ignore the penalty to move and shoot. Like they pretend they stood still. Of course they hit on threes. Why would they do anything other than hit on threes?
Makes sense.
I'm blue.
Yeah, like and now it's like, but you see Ultramarines running out of a drop pod hit on fours because they pretend they stood still, which you can't do. Iron Hands coming out of a drop pod hit on threes because they ignore the penalty for shooting heavy weapons, which you can do. Um, so this hits a lot of things. This is so Ultramarines out of Deep Strike and Outflank. This is Argent Shroud models like Argent Shroud Retributors. And this is things that, but people are going to see this at tournaments and people are going to miss this one because it's the weirdest rule and it doesn't feel right. But if you play Argent Shroud and you put a bunch of Retributors in Outflank and they come running and you put them on the table edge, you go, all right, shoot 12 multi-melter shots at you. It's 4s. You're hitting on 4s. Feels like it should be 3s. It's not. It's 4s. Because
the
of this
Argent
bullet
Shroud
point.
one's even weirder than that, right? Because
Yeah, the Argent Shroud one actually would always have been 4s because it actually specifically says they have to have moved or
Normal
advanced
move.
in the movement phase, which they don't actually do if you put them on the table. Which is, I think,
they
what
have that
part of
normal
this
move is the important part.
they have to normal move or advance, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think is what part of this thing is trying to do because a lot of abilities, I actually don't know exactly what the Ultramarine one says, but I'm pretty sure it says you have to normal move or advance. Sorry, just normal move, but not advance. But you can double check that one. Which is the reason why all these things like don't really work when you're coming in at Deep Strike, because you actually just like kind of appear having moved, but not having actually made a normal move or an advance. And they just codified it as just like across the board, you just take the penalty. You can't pretend that you were standing still. This also gets rid of like, excuse me, some of the weirdness of models that reposition. So things like the Dark Matter Crystal in Thousand Suns or the Veil of Darkness in Necrons, where you could declare your model is going to remain stationary and then have it teleport. And then when it appears, it's like, well, has it remained stationary or did it teleport? Like, it kind of did both. Can I use stratagems that only work when it remains stationary? Because if so, those 10 Terminators are shooting 80 shots, and that's probably not okay. So it fixes some problems like that, but it's super unintuitive with specifically with like Ultramarines and Argent Shroud, like coming out of Outflank with heavy weapons. They just feel like they should hit on 3s because in every other situation with heavy weapons, they would hit on 3s, and they just don't.
Yeah. It's weird. You just like think from a narrative perspective, like what are these guys who are coming out from Outflank doing different from literally the rest of your army? Actually, factually, the rest of your army.
Yeah, and this one feel like this is a rules as written. Like this is, it's not even just rules as written. Like this is intentional. They didn't like oopsie daisies themselves into that. Like, they just like wrote does not count as having remained stationary regardless of the rules on the data sheet. Like, okay, yeah, like I mean that's what they said.
I mean, it's hard to argue against that.
Yeah, but be aware because people are going to get this wrong and they're not being malicious. It's like buried at the bottom of like a 3-page FAQ and it doesn't feel like it should be a rule.
Yeah, it really doesn't, because like when it first got explained to me, I was just thinking like, I know like what the thing says, but it doesn't seem like it should be that way.
Yeah, it also matters for both Death Guard and Ultramarines coming out of Outflank. Their bolt discipline doesn't work for that turn because reasons, because they both kind of always having remain stationary. This also means do you have heavy weapons on infantry at all in Death Guard? I don't think so. Right?
Like I can, I think I can take an autocannon or.
Oh yeah, you can take autocannons. Yeah, so like I don't know, you take those penalties because you weren't stationary.
Yeah. Yeah. Why not a question? I just built 2 autocannon
Yeah,
dudes.
you take autocannons.
Don't blight launchers? No.
Those are assault.
Assault.
Okay.
And they're great. Anyway, that's all I have to say on that one. It's just weird. I
It's
don't
weird.
Like
it doesn't feel right.
Gotcha.
And
it's just gonna gotcha people.
Yeah, that's basically it. It's just gonna gotcha people.
Let's kind of combine our 2 topics here for a second. Let's say you're playing a game, your opponent brings in some Ultramarine Devastators, in the tactical doctrine. They start shooting other things, they move over to that, they roll the dice, say hitting on 3s, blah blah blah, and then all of a sudden you're like, they're already onto winning, like, wait, did you say hitting on 3s? You're hitting on 4s. Is that a yellow card infraction?
Oh, hang on. You missed the part where the game grinds to a halt. We both have to look up FAQs for 10 minutes.
All All right.
All right, then we get
So
to the point. Oh, we are hitting
pause
a
the
force.
clock.
No, stop.
So after pausing the clock to look up the FAQ, and also there's no Wi-Fi in the building.
No,
All
there
right.
is Wi-Fi, but you can't connect to it, so you can't also use your LTE.
I apologize for turning your question into a joke. What was the question?
So the opponent like says hitting on threes, and then they pick up some dice. You think there's a 3 in there, and then all of a sudden, just like, wait a minute,
Hang
you
on,
weren't supposed to be
fours.
hitting on. You're supposed to be
Yeah.
hitting on fours. Don't you know your rules? Blah blah blah. Blah. Is that a yellow card? Is that in the spirit of what a yellow card is? Are
No,
you
it's not in the spirit of
weaponizing-
what a yellow card is, because it's if it's the first time you told them, like they might not have just because it's not a natural like rules explanation and interpretation. Now they deep strike like more times, and like either in your game or in subsequent games, and they're still rolling to hit on threes after they've been explained the rules, the FAQ, and they've like demonstrated understanding of those things. Like then they're in violation. Then that's a yellow card.
Yeah,
I lean towards it's not a yellow card. If we're at top table at GT and like he's been doing this the whole tournament, then it probably needs to be a yellow card because there needs to be some sort of penalty for him doing this the entire event. But
here's the problem. So there's kind of two layers to this. One, even if I would think you still should call the TO,
Mhm, for sure.
and but the TO should not give a yellow card. Just kind of say like, hey, this is why we're going to roll back. It doesn't look like the game state is that far back. You just have to redo your hit rolls. Problem solved, right? Simple. I think a lot of people would have just naturally started doing that, to be honest.
Yeah, for sure.
But it's important for that TO to come over and see that this has happened. And the reason why is it in the next game, if that were to happen, now you know that the person was already explained the rules, and they're not just like doing this to every progressive opponent.
Yeah, they're not just like seeing who knows and who doesn't. For sure.
Right.
Yeah, I like I said, I think most of the time I would say no. If it's it's like the top tables of a GT, then like you have to start thinking about like how many people has this happened to, and like even if like it's not malicious, but it is a game advantage that this player is getting, and they should probably be penalized for it.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, bullet point 6. Like everyone go read it. It's
Well,
completely mind-boggling that exists.
I think if they've listened to us, they understand what it is. They don't need to go reread it, but it's
Fair.
it is.
Go read it so that
to
you know where to
solidify it in
locate
your mind
it.
so that you know it exists. Burned in there forever, so GW can remove it in the next FAQ because everyone gets it wrong anyways. All right, shall I call it?
Yep.
For those of you wondering, I don't know if I actually mentioned why at the beginning of the podcast. I have moved into my new place, so I'm no longer in the basement of my other place to handle the podcast. You get to see me in all my glory. It's not much glory.
Glorious glare above him.
I'll have to look into that.
Kevin, I feel like I should send you this extra webcam that I have.
Why don't I come to your place and we play a game and then I pick it up? Because
I
we're
want to
good
play
friends.
a game with Chris.
Because me and Chris are good head over to the other person's house friends, and as opposed to whatever each of our relationship with Ben is.
I literally played a game with you this weekend at your house. Then I helped you move in.
Listen, I have no addiction to Warhammer. I'm not supposed to be moving stuff in and before I'm even fully moved in having Warhammer games at my place. Never. Never.
All right. On that note.
On that note, thank you everybody for listening to this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sorry I had to run out for 5 minutes in the middle of the podcast. But
Those dang kids on my yard. Wah, 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 wah.
driving down my property values. What do I pay taxes for? Yeah, I'd like to thank our contributors for this episode, Kevin Lieb and Benjamin Rubenstein. This has been the 3D6 Charge podcast. Bye for now. Don't roll any ones.